killed him! Oh. I'm switching back to glass, but in order to say why, we have to do a little bit of a lore dump. Over the past 2 years, I've tried a lot of peripherals. For a long time, I mained the Zowie S2 or S1, owning essentially all of the versions of each size. I had moved over to this mouse from the G Pro Wireless back in 2019, loving the extra accentuation of the shape, having a more fat ass that I could rest my curled pinky on, as well as being a slightly lighter weight than that old GPW. But over the years, with more and more mice releasing pushing the bounds of lightweight, I wanted to try experimenting with some more different shapes and weights. I went from trying the rear-humped raised Lamzu Atlantis, to the Pulsar X2H, to the X2V2, the Phantek Helios 2 Pro, a failed clone of my favorite mouse, the S2, and eventually settling on the Zowie U2. The raised rear hump from mice actually hurt my hands, despite being theoretically better suited for my grip type. The Helios 2 coding was awful, and the implementation of optical switches just felt so much poorer than the goated Huanos blue shell pink dots. The X2V2 was too small and too flat, but the Zowie U2 was the best of all worlds, a narrow front, wide back, and a good coating even if it wasn't the glossy Zowie coating that I had preferred, and was wireless unlike the other Zowie offerings at the time, coming in at around 60 grams. I had also picked up a new mousepad, having used the large desk-size HyperX pad for many years. I decided to pick up an Artisan Heian, a textured fast pad. This was when I first started aim training, testing out each of these different peripherals and Kovaaks to see which I performed better with, playing about 50 hours with the above mice and pad. But in my search for new mousepads, I discovered glass mousepads. Hard surfaces that lack in stability but make up for that with smoothness. Given I mostly played tracking games, and the game I was aim training to improve in was the finals, this really intrigued me. I had seen many negative reviews of the pads complaining that they're hard to control and hard to learn, but at the same time, plenty of other players and reviewers who had dedicated themselves to playing extensive amounts of times on these pads, singing their praises, saying that the stability issues were just a skill set you had to learn, and the night I watched some of those videos, Amazon had a 50% flash sale on the SkyPad 3.0. Bezos is always watching. So I snagged it, and guess what? I really hated it. It was a scratchy, unsmooth experience that sort of went against everything I had assumed the pad would be. I played on it a little bit, but my scores were always awful and it felt horrible to use. At first I thought I just needed to practice on it more, but stability wasn't my issue with it. I was able to hit some good static scores, but tracking is where I faltered. This was an odd conundrum for me. I put some more time on it, but ultimately I switched back to the Heian, which I only kind of liked, but that sent me further down the rabbit hole of pads. Eventually, I saw 3 reviews for this other glass mousepad that will be the focus of today's video, the Padsmith Empress. A textured glass pad that was supposed to be more controlled than the SkyPad, also with some cool art. At the time, this pad was sold out, but Padsmith announced they'd be doing a restock eventually, so I stalked the Discord for months waiting for any news on a restock so I could pick one up and try it out. I was lucky enough to snag one for a little bit cheaper than expected because of the factory issue Padsmith encountered causing some bubbles on the bottom of the base. This didn't really bother me because it was just aesthetic and the pad would be on the desk anyways, so I set up this pad with the U2 and instantly broke multiple PBs and Kovaaks on every scenario type. I was astounded. It was a night and day buttery smooth experience compared to the SkyPad. I was able to track well in scenarios like Plaza, and even flick and control well to get good scores in static. It was such an improvement I immediately took it in-game and sort of stopped playing Kovaaks. I felt I had found my endgame. Or did I? I used the pad for around 9 months, mainly playing the finals and also playing other games like Stranova, loving every second of the pad. But that's not where the story ends. Eventually, Splitgate 2 released, and having played a lot of Splitgate 1, I was interested and grinded it with one of my close friends I got into mouse and keyboard aiming. The problem is the Empress felt off to me in that game. Splitgate is centered around portals which involve large sweeping movements to chain portals together, and for some reason on release I could not get used to this on the Empress. What was holding me back? I second-guessed myself and thought, maybe some of the negative impressions of glass pads held some water. I felt I had to raise my sensitivity for this game, and was that mixed with the glass surface making me less precise? So back down the rabbit hole I went, looking for other mousepads to try. I had the Heian, but as I mentioned earlier, I didn't really like it much. But around this time, everyone and their mother was shilling the Artisan Zero, so I snagged one. And to be honest, it was a really good pad initially. Swapping from playing on glass pad for a while to a more controlled cloth pad made my aim feel very snappy and controlled. Splitgate is generally a lower time to kill than the finals, so the decrease in smoothness for tracking didn't really bother me too much. But I also picked up a cloth pad from Zowie, just to try, because I'm a fan of Zowie's products, the GSR SE, and surprisingly enough, this pad felt way better to me than the Zero. Why would this $35 updated Zowie pad feel better than the high-quality, top-tier $75 Artisan pad? I didn't know at the time, so I just kept using the GSR since it felt good to me. Eventually I fell out of Splitgate 2 due to the many problems it had, and went back to playing the finals. Upon returning, I had the sneaking suspicion my aim was worse than the last time I had played. I figured this was just due to switching games and switching back to a lower sensitivity, so I just kept grinding hoping this would improve over time. But it didn't. I felt I had hit a plateau and that something was holding me back from playing like I used to. The Zero is a pad lauded by aimers everywhere as being incredible, so surely the problem here is me, right? And my lack of practice? I have historically always been good with single-fire weapons like DMRs, snipers, revolvers, and shotguns. But for some reason, I just couldn't hit anything with these weapons in the finals after coming back with the Zero. In my mind, being on a cloth pad should make this easier. You theoretically have more control for these fine moments or flicks, so why was I struggling so much? I looked over at the Empress laid up against my wall collecting dust and thought, why not? I had used this in the past to great success, so what's the harm in trying? But what shocked me is I instantly started hitting my shots with weapons like the BFR Titan and CB01 repeater from the finals.
Oh, I fucking got him.
That guy just got absolutely worked. Holy shit. Like, what? I was so confused. How could there be such a fast, drastic improvement in my aim on a specific weapon type with a pad that should be less stable for this? Over the next month, I swapped back and forth from the Zero to the GSR to the Empress trying to figure this out. And after VOD reviewing a couple instances of gameplay, I actually figured out why. I used to play on fast sensitivities, but I've played on around 50 to 70 cm for many, many years. And in the finals, I play 60 cm. A full swipe of my mouse on my mousepad is not even a 360 in-game. And what I discovered is that I press into the pad a bit because of this low sense. And on cloth pads, I'm actually fighting the pad to do micro adjustments and large flicks due to the type of pressure I'm exerting on it. The reason the GSR felt better to me than the Zero in that previous month was because I wasn't fighting the pad as much due to it being a more firm surface. On glass pads, this just doesn't happen at all really. The amount of friction present doesn't really change when a little bit more force is applied downward onto the pad. This meant I could trust myself more when going for wide flicks, and had more expected control during micro adjustments. Where I thought the mouse would go, given the force I was applying to it, is actually where it would go. And this also led me to discover why I don't have stability issues on the Empress. Having played on low sensitivities for many years, I developed the skill of stopping the mouse with my own force rather than being helped by the pad. Normally when I tell people I play on 60 cm, they give me funny responses about how slow it is. Then I tell them I'm on glass and their confusion compounds. But I think my history of aiming with this style has fostered good fundamentals for switching over to glass. I don't feel unstable on my wide flicks because I'm stopping the mouse with my forearms instead of my fingers or wrist like I would on a higher sensitivity, and my micro adjustments have the smoothness from the glass surface without the muddiness I was getting from softer cloth pads. In the time since swapping back, my aim has only improved. I'm able to hit shots with single fire weapons again, and I can still track enemies smoothly like I was able to do before. It's the best of both worlds. I was playing more instinctively, trusting myself to move mouse correctly instead of second-guessing every flick and adjustment I was making on the Zero. The Empress's controlled and textured surface gave me just enough control to not feel like I'm moving my mouse over an air hockey table, and also a smooth, buttery experience for tracking my mouse over large distances of the pad. I have very clammy skin, so I needed to use a sleeve so that my arm wouldn't stick to the pad, but I had made another discovery. Using the sleeve actually stopped my arm from sticking to the desk as well, and from sticking to cloth pads, which eliminated the instances of my under forearm catching on my desk, messing up my flicks or my tracking. Playing on 60 cm means my arm can be in many locations for different movements. Sometimes I'm controlling my aim with the center of the pad, but oftentimes I'm controlling my aim on the bottom or sides of the pad, oftentimes putting a different kind of pressure on the mouse than I would in just the center. On cloth pads, this led to a lot of inconsistency, but on glass pads this problem just doesn't exist. I have the same input whether I'm in the center of the pad or the bottom of the pad when tracking targets that are falling, for example. The Empress is a truly impressive pad that not many people have done an in-depth review of, but it is not for everyone. My own experience of improvement has led me to develop these specific skills I think can be utilized well with this pad, but not everyone likes swinging their arm across the Pacific Ocean every time they want to turn around in game. But if you are a psychopath like me, I recommend trying to pick one up. They are sold out on the main website, so unfortunately you'll have to get one on the aftermarket. I have not tried the Empress V2, the new version of this pad, but I plan to pick one up and compare it to the base Empress and see if there are any major differences. This goes to show how unique peripheral experiences can be for people, and I had to cycle through a lot of different peripherals to reach where I am now. Had I not switched back to cloth in early 2025, I would have not gained the knowledge I have now around why I perform a certain way on certain pads, and that knowledge is utilized in aiming. I would be worse off having not had this experience. Even trying something you end up not liking will give you more information that will help you determine what you like out of a given product and how you use given products to get a certain outcome. Trying the Lambzu Atlantis, X2H, and ZA13 led me to the realization that despite being primarily claw grip, using mice with a raised rear hump or flat sides hurts my hand because of how they position the sides of my palm with my ring and pinky fingers. This knowledge helped me with future purchases and helped with technique around developing my grip style with further mice changes to avoid hand pain. I'm playing at my best now, and I've also gotten back into aim training due to the release of the Viscose benches. In my opinion, they are much better structured for improvement for shit players like me than the Voltaic benchmarks. I've had a lot of fun with it, and might do a video tracking my improvement from dogshit to slightly less dogshit. Remember that peripheral experience will be unique to everybody, and that testing different things and learning for yourself what works for you and what doesn't is a rewarding experience by itself, and it can give you more insight into what you like, what you don't like, and that process will show itself within performance outcomes as you build that knowledge. All of that to say, I think the pad is great, and I think some people would get some use out of trying it out. Thanks everybody for sitting and listening to me yap again. Peace.